All right, so we had some interesting news the other day, and it's certainly something that Sony's not going to be too excited to hear about. While I don't think it's going to affect them in the short term, it's certainly something to keep an eye on here, especially as we've seen things evolve rapidly on the side of the Switch with homebrew and full-on PC emulators, because now we're starting to see more and more emulators pop up online for the PlayStation 4, but now the PlayStation 5 has actually been named in a project, and we're going to talk a little bit about that here today. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. So the reason I mentioned with Sony that they won't be too happy to hear about this is because they certainly haven't forgotten what took place during that PlayStation Portable era, where it did have a harder time selling games, especially compared to other Sony platforms and systems. And let's be real, a lot of that had to do with most of us just modding our PSP. It was pretty easy at the time, and then people were just running emulators and ROMs and, yeah, full-on commercial releases on the system. So Sony, I'm sure, hasn't forgotten that, and they've also probably looked around and seen what's happened with the Switch, where it was very easy to modify that system out of the gate after people realized, oh, a paperclip will do it. And then we're to the point now where you can have full-on emulators on your PC that will actually run the games better than the Switch will. So when you start hearing about PlayStation 5 emulator, people got pretty excited. But let's first take a look at some of the emulators that are already kind of known here. And I do also want to mention, we can see the emulators, Spine, Orbital, GPCS4, and the one we'll be talking about, KYTY. The thing I want to mention is fake PlayStation 4 emulators have been used for years now to try to get people to sign up for like phishing sites and all kinds of stuff, basically to scam people by promising them they'll be able to play those PlayStation 4 games without needing a console. They can just fire it up on their Dell laptop or something. Not the case, all right? So obviously don't fall for any of that. I feel like most of you already understand it, but it is kind of interesting to start hearing that PS4 emulators are starting to actually make some legitimate, tangible progress. Now, the big one is KYTY. That's what popped up in the news recently. And if we take a look at their GitHub page right now for the project, it's pretty obvious why that is. It's because they mentioned PlayStation 5 as one of the target platforms right now. Its graphics for PS5 is not yet implemented, but it's possible to run some simple games for PS4. This is currently version 0.1.0. So it's very early on, right? But yeah, you can go on here, you can download the build, and they even have some screenshots here of like Worms, WMD starting up, and there's a video currently of someone testing it out. Doesn't run the best. It's pretty choppy, and it's kind of almost slideshow-like, but that's going to come down to obviously your system configuration, but also the emulator itself being in its early stages. Right now, I'm sure they're just trying to get this thing to launch games, and then they'll worry about compatibility and doing things to smooth out the visuals, and who knows, maybe eventually get to the point where this emulator will run the games better than the PlayStation 4 will. And this is an interesting thing when it comes to the PS4 specifically, because all of the new releases from Sony right now are still going to the PS4. Sure, there are a few like Ratchet & Clank, Returnal. Those are just PS5 games, but God of War, Horizon, Gran Turismo, those are all also on the PS4. So the idea then of being able to play those games on a PC without needing the PS4, I'm sure for some people would be pretty enticing. But you have to remember, it's early on. There's still a lot of core features that are not implemented, like audio. That seems kind of important. MP4 video, network, multi-user, and so on there. But the fact that they actually have it launching and we have visuals on screen is a pretty big deal because, again, we've seen how rapidly things can evolve with these emulators, looking at even something like the Switch. The Switch is a different case, though, because Nintendo and NVIDIA essentially used an X1. Like, they changed some of the clock speeds and different things there, right? Small modifications. But the fact that they used that X1, which is a chip that's very well known, and it actually was to the point where one of the exploits in the X1 was leveraged in order to hack the system Well, that was off and running, no problem there. And the fact that the system was hacked allowed them to dump games, and obviously we see games leak out for the Switch online, and people are already playing them on emulators before the thing reaches store shelves. Which I will say with the PS4, that's been opened up a bit more recently now to where, yeah, I'm sure people could be dumping games. But I mean, the thing with the PS4 and even PS3, some of these games are like 30, 40, 50 gigabytes in size. It becomes a bit more difficult to download, upload, move those around for the vast majority of people. The Switch games can be like a couple of gigabytes up to like 10 or 12 or something like that. A bit more manageable there. I can't imagine with the PS5, by the way, when people start dumping those games, which are like 80 to 100 gigabytes at times. That's a whole thing there. So you would also have to figure out how to dump the games. And basically what I'm saying with the PS5 is it'd be a long time before the emulator is able to do anything other than maybe just boot up like the home screen at a couple of frames a second or something there. The fact that we are just now getting these screenshots in-game for the PS4 tells me it'll probably be towards the end of the PS5 generation that we actually have things up and running even a little bit for it. And I think that's probably the correct way to go. The PS4 is on its way out. The PS5 is coming in. So I kind of think that Sony will be a little less aggressive around PS4 emulation potentially, which I will say there's not much they'll be able to do with a project like this that's open source and is not using any of Sony's like copywritten code or anything there. The idea is they have to reverse engineer the PlayStation 4 and how it functions for this emulator all on their own, like their own unique original code. If they do that, and that's the case, then there's nothing really Sony can do. It's one of the reasons Nintendo doesn't have all of these Switch emulators taken down. Legally, they just can't do much because it's open source and you can see for yourself that the code is original. That said, I'm sure Sony would put this project in particular under the microscope if all of a sudden they started to pop out PS5 screenshots like they're doing with Worms WMD here, showing that they're able to figure out the graphics and other parts of it. Again, I don't really see this all of a sudden running PS5 games completely fine in the next couple of years. But the PS4 now, with what we're seeing here and some movement, I think we could be to that point, and that means that, yeah, God of War Ragnarok would be playable on PC through emulator. There is one other thing to this, though, and a reason it may not be as interesting for a PS4 or even PS5 emulator to exist. And that's because Sony is making a massive push towards PC right now, and I think by the time you see this PS5 or maybe even PS4 emulator up to where you can have these games completely playable, they might just be available on Steam anyway. So like there are going to be a lot of people probably just buying and downloading it there rather than jumping through all of the hoops to make it work through emulation. But either way, it is interesting when you see some of these more advanced systems like the PS4, I'll even say the Xbox 360, which does have working emulators right now. I was able to play GoldenEye, the leaked build on PC through an Xbox 360 emulator without any real issue, and it played fairly well. It's just when you start hearing about a current system like the PlayStation 5 be brought up in notes for an emulator that you go, oh, hold on, is that really going to be a thing? Well, we'll see. I will tell you this, though, if it starts spitting out, this emulator that they have, starts spitting out PS5 screenshots, I think it's going to start making the news all over the place, and then Sony will probably take notice. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below, with the PS4 emulator seemingly making some progress and even the PS5 being named. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.